Hey guys, welcome back. What constitutes the film look? I'm going to review a plugin called Dehancer Film Emulation. They are kind enough to send me a copy to test this out. Although they're not the sponsor of the video, I'm gladly reviewing this product and give everyone my 2 cents. I'm going to give you my verdict on the pros and cons, what works and what doesn't for a particular workflow that I do. So watch to the end. I have this image. This was shot with the Canon R5C. And we're talking about an 8K digital image. It's really sharp, and the architecture is sharp. There's bright sunlight, there's shadow. With Dehancer, you want to understand that it's looking for more of a negative to develop and print. Ideally, you want something that has more detail and information before you get into Dehancer plugin. So for here, I'm gonna preserve some of the highlight. You can see bringing it back. The shadows are fine. I might lower the exposure just a tiny bit more because I think the image asks for a more of an obvious shadow. I'm playing with the contrast just to see what kind of image I might want to achieve. I'm gonna undo that, okay, because I'm gonna use Dehancer for that film look. Okay, I'm all set. I have a pretty decent adjusted image, but also preserving most of the information. You see the curve, nothing is done there. And what you do is you right click on the image and you want to select edit in, and then you can select edit in Dehancer Lightroom plugin. Now what happens is that it will automatically create a copy of the image from the raw in 16-bit TIFF. Okay, so this is the interface of Dehancer Photo. What you see is that you have column of presets on the left. Here, select the Dehancer team developed by them. I'm just gonna select all presets. Darkroom photography, there's the part where you process the negative, and then there's the part where you print onto the sheet of paper. And for motion pictures, at the end, it needs to be printed on a roll of film to be projected in the cinema. 2 steps in the process. With the profiles, it will select just the kind of film that you want to emulate. For the presets, it's a combination of the 2 steps. If I just select profiles, let's say I want to narrow down to a color positive because I'm looking at a landscape image, Velvia 100, Velvia 50, this looks more like it. If I look at Kodak, I might select Kodachrome 64 experimental just to see how it goes. Okay, now here you can have the histogram on or off. You have a 1:1 button to see the image 1:1 ratio, 100%. Preview what you want to check, uncheck, very handy. The spacebar is actually the preview shortcut. Now there's tons of things applied already, but if we want to look at it as a whole, you can still adjust the kind of exposure compensation. It moves quite a bit. Now I'm hitting Command Z to undo, but it's actually not working. I have to press this little guy. Okay, so you got to get used to that. Under the film profile, you can actually select push and pulling the film. Now with this is quite interesting because it's stretching the histogram right below, you see, but it's not going overboard. Like it's not clipping a lot. So if I go all the way pushing the film and all the way pulling the film, it's not affecting that much. So it's actually pretty similar to actual film processing. Whereas when you move the exposure, it changes the image quite a bit. All right, with that said, I might want the image to be a tiny bit on the warm side. Defringe, this is more like eliminating the color aberration around the edge. So for this image, it doesn't really have that problem. I'm just going to keep it at 50. Let's look at film development. If you want to do anything as you are developing the film, you can boost the contrast. Some of these effects you really have to zoom in and see. Film development and then film compression. See what the impact level is. White point, if you look at the brightest area, if it's pushing that bit of highlight further out, the higher it is, the more is preserved. Having everything doesn't mean it's good. Now just bear in mind. For this image, I do enjoy seeing the tonal range increased, but not by too much, just a tiny bit. Color density, yeah, it's way too much. I'm gonna give it a little bit. Black point, white point. If you want that fade, this is where the black point comes in handy. This part of the histogram really get lifted up when you change the black point. You see what I mean? With the white point, with this kind of image, the sky is also affected because the sky is actually on the kind of highlight area. Color mode, I'm keeping it as normal. Now print. Am I printing it on the glossy paper? Am I printing it on the standard kind of motion picture film would be Kodak, the Vision 3 2383 print film. We select that. It's actually affecting the image quite a bit. Now, the Fuji tends to be a tiny bit on the cooler side. If I lower saturation, nah. I'll keep it. Lower it by a tiny bit. Target white. I'm not gonna mess with it too much. Color head. This is almost like you're in a color darkroom if you're messing with each of the channels. The R channel would be the cyan and red. So you increase red or you decrease to get cyan. In the middle, nothing has changed. We're actually color correcting. Let's say if I really want this building to be white, I'm gonna reduce the red until that becomes white. Honestly, the building is not perfectly white. If you want to correct it, it might correct at this point and it's pretty close to real life. But the whole point is we want a color shift. We want a particular mood for the image. So we're actually embracing the color. I'm gonna reset. Very cool. Okay, I think one of the things that Dehancer really excels at is how you can manipulate the grain on your image. Let me explain a bit more on that. You can select the size of the grain, the amount. Now this is where it's really cool, is that you can control the amount of noise in different tones. Say in the shadow, I want it less. I'm gonna keep the midtones. I'm gonna lower the highlight as well, just enough. Positive film tends to have a smoother grain structure. You know, this looks pretty good. Okay, now if we continue, this is another thing that Dehancer really excels at. Apart from the grain control is halation. Now halation is something that really particular for film. Is more of a defect. It's the property of where film reacts to light. The light hits the film in a way that the chemicals create a certain red halo around subjects. You will see this kind of red light around, especially when the light and dark meets. See here? If we have halation turned off, huge difference. So creative question for you. How much is enough? I think anything that's overdone is not wise. For your own creative use, I think you can do anything you want. But if you're just starting off and you're unsure about what your creative intent is, around 50 to 70% when you're trying something new and not to go overboard. I don't think it needs to scream at people and saying that, oh, this is shot on film or I'm really trying to fake it. It's more like how to create an image that pleases people, enjoyable to look at. I'm just going to lower the impact level to around 50. You can shift the hue to more of a yellow. I'm just going to keep it in the middle. Amplify. I'm not sure how amplify and impact differ from each other, but the local and the global diffusion, the local diffusion is where it's at. Well, I'm just keeping these two. Maybe the smoothness can help out a little. Let's smooth some of the edges out. Source limiter. I think that just decreased the amount. Okay, pretty decent. I'm going to leave it at that. After halation, you can do something film kind of excels is that bloom effect. Obviously, if you have an image that's really dull and gray and doesn't really have a lot of contrast, and especially it doesn't really see where light is coming, it might not have that clear of an effect. But if you're shooting something like the light is really shining at the lens, or you're particularly shooting at night, the bloom will be pretty clear. Almost feels like a diffusion filter on your camera. And anything is too much would be unpleasant. I think immediately I'm just gonna lower the impact level. Whatever looks natural is good to me. Looking back, I feel like the grain is a bit overdone. For me right now, I want to maybe lower the amount and size. Now right now it's pretty monochromatic, I think, the grain. If we push it all the way to 100, you can see it has a bit of color. Maybe 70%. There we go. Now vignette, I'm gonna zoom out because vignette you need to see the whole image. I'm curious, like I'm not seeing the kind of control of where the vignette is shaped. Okay, if I decrease it all the way and now I can see it. Okay, this is more of a vertical oval. This is more of a horizontal oval, I would say. Increase in size, decrease in size. Okay, now it's back into Lightroom and you can see the new image. You can edit how it's named. I think I didn't do anything and it's just created this hyphen edit at the end with .tiff. We're editing one image at a time. So you also have the option of exporting that into a JPEG and processing it that way. Most of the time I actually export as JPEG because a lot of times the images doesn't need to be that big. For some advertisement, once everything is done with the retouch, then I change it into 8-bit TIFF. Sometimes they require changing from RGB to CMYK as well with the color mode. It's kind of like my workflow. A lot of people shooting weddings or shooting portraits, fashion, I think you want to look at a portrait. So here I have a model. I'm going to prepare this image in a way that will extract more information from it. But let's just say I'm happy with this image. Okay, here I think a lot of wedding photographers also uses Fujicolor Pro 400H. Superior is a pretty standard film. One of my favorite film, Portra 160NC or Portraitures. 400 is very common, but I'm in the studio, I have flash. I can use strobe lights. I'm going to use 160. It's actually saving my previous settings. One click of a button, I can just reset it. Pretty easy. For this one, I'm just going for the glossy paper. See how that looks. Tiny bit of color shift. Positive film for advertisement. Colors a bit more vivid. More of a landscape and still life kind of shots. Shoot a lot of negatives for portraits. So I'm going to keep using negative, decrease the grain again. Lower the size. Okay, looks pretty good. I really like this actually, how halation. It's giving the whole image a kind of red tint. Not much. What about bloom? The skin is blooming. We increase the impact to 100%, dialing it back to around 80%. Do we need a vignette? I'm gonna uncheck vignette. I think the image is ready. I press OK. So this is how I would process choosing different type of film for the kind of subject that I want. I think there's tons of profiles and tons of presets that you can play with. I haven't done anything with the black and white, so be my guest, play around with that in Photoshop. Let me show you one example real quick. Let's say I want to print this out and frame it, but I still want to edit it in Photoshop before having all those things applied by Dehancer. Savage some of the tonal range, and then I can start editing with all the things I want to change. So let's say I want to take away some of these dusts from the train. For me, if I add any kind of grain or halation or bloom, I don't think Photoshop and the healing brush respond that well with you have so many layers of textures. It needs to recreate that texture. So let's say the stamp tool is more like a copycat. It's fine. If I'm using the healing brush, it's somewhat a semi-AI, content-aware kind of tool. So the computer is actually generating something from it. And my experience with Photoshop is that you're going to get something funny when you have multiple layers of textures with grain, halation, and bloom, and all that kind of good stuff. All the good stuff that makes an image looks really film-like by Dehancer. It's gonna create more problems for you when you start to manipulate your image and do fine retouching as an aftermath. You see what I mean? And let's say I want to manipulate the perspective. My experience for noise is that it's gonna stretch with it. So I have distorted the image and corrected the perspective so that everything is straight. Now, if I would have done that with the grain, it might have been stretched of the bottom part outward. I'm happy with the image, it's ready. I hit Command J, I duplicate the layer. This is a copy layer, layer 1. If you go to filter, so the plugin is here as well in Photoshop, it's gonna pop up how familiar. Okay, now this image is already a 16-bit TIFF. But my test is that when I was opening an image that was just a low-res JPEG, so if you want to play around with that, obviously you have less information, the image is at a lower resolution, know what you're working with. Let's have some fun with Vision 3 50D, get some cinematic look going. Okay, this is Vision 3. I'm gonna do a Kodak 2383 print film. So the whole motion film package. I didn't shoot this with the DSLR out. Actually, I shot this with a pocket digital camera when I was traveling in Kyoto. But you can see once the image is already quite pixelated, the grain applied, even though the size is 1, it's pretty grainy. This is where the juicy part is, when the light hits the top part of some of these details. Vignette helps to centralize our attention to the middle, right around there. Okay, cool. And I'm just gonna click OK and see what happens. Boom! This is insane. It almost seems like if I would use this plugin, fine-tuning the image. For those of you who are always on the go and edit a lot of your images on your phone and uploading it to social media and whatnot, the Dehancer mobile version for iOS actually can help you to do that. It's very similar to what we have just done on the computer. So if you just open it up, open any photos from your library. I recently shot, which I thought was quite cool. Now I'm just playing around with this because I haven't really activated the key, but you see a little watermark on it. Once you have activated it, it's gonna go away. It's very similar. You look at all the presets. It's loaded. Tons of preset. We're not looking at something that's like a Instagram filter because there's so much that we can adjust. Let's just say a simple Kodak Gold profile. Film grain, halation, bloom, vignette. You can share it, you can save it. So this is Dehancer for iOS mobile app. Okay, so my verdict is that there's tons of options for how to edit that film look, and it's beyond any kind of digital manipulation softwares that can offer. So this is really amazing. This is not just for still photographs. They actually developed this first for DaVinci Resolve in video editing. So they are actually available also for Premiere Pro and Final Cut, which I'm super excited about the Final Cut version because it's what I use for video editing. It's very genuine in terms of the tiny details, and it has that kind of dimension that you are looking for in film. The downside or room for improvement is the way it works with RAW from the Lightroom workflow, not being able to work in batches. So I can't really sync all the settings or multiple images. It has to create TIFF copy. But for now, I think I would treat Dehancer more of a finishing touch. Do my adjustment in Lightroom, preserve more of the detail, more of the information and tonality, and then do my manipulation, my retouching. Once the image is finalized, then I would do that finishing touch with the Photoshop version of plugin and emulate that film look into the final image. This is how I would use. Well, isn't it amazing to know that there's a team out there developing a software that's this meticulous in getting that film look? I'm gonna leave a link down below. See it for yourself. You're gonna get 10% discount with my link. See if that fits into your workflow. We're talking about using digital files shot with a digital camera and turn that into genuine film looking images. Any questions? Let me know down below. Have a great day, guys. Peace out.